Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for being here. I am very excited to welcome you today and appreciate you giving up some of your Halloween to spend time with us. I'm very, very excited for our event today. Just going to give folks a minute or two to come in from the waiting room. I'm seeing everybody trickling in right now. We will get started in just about a minute, but in the meantime, I'm very excited to be here with you all. I also want to acknowledge the fact that I have antennas, which is not usually my attire for these events, but it's Halloween, my favorite holiday, so I could not resist. Appreciate you bearing with me while I bug out during our event today. I'm going to give us about 30 more seconds as I see a lot more folks are still coming on in, but we will kick off very soon. You are in the right place. I'm so excited to be here with you today, and I hope that everybody is having a fabulous Thursday and Halloween if you are celebrating. And with that, I think I'm going to go ahead and get us started. I am seeing that we have quite a few folks here. Hello, my name is Brinton Botkin. I use she, her pronouns, and I lead student marketing here at Handshake. I am so excited to be here with you today because we know that launching your early career journey can feel really daunting, and we want to give folks the tools to be successful in a wide variety of career paths. So this fall, we've been bringing in recruiters and talent acquisition specialists from different industries and disciplines to answer your questions. Today's panelist is a senior talent acquisition partner from Ncontracts with 9 years of experience recruiting for tech companies. He will share some tips and tricks with you for making a good impression with hiring professionals in today's market, which we all know is top of mind for so many folks. Just for some quick level setting, for the next 20 minutes or so, we're going to have a structured conversation with some pre-planned questions, but we will have that Q&A box down at the bottom of your screen open for you for the rest of the event. So please add any questions that you have over the course of the session down there. We will do our best to get to as many as possible. You will only see your own submitted questions instead of everybody else's, so please don't think we're ignoring you. We tend to get a lot. We will get to as many as we can, I promise. And with that, groundwork has been laid. Let's get into it. Kevin, can you please introduce yourself and give a bit of background on you and what you're working on at Ncontracts today?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you for having me here. I have been with Ncontracts for 2 years now as the talent acquisition partner. I've been recruiting for about 9 years. I started off as a teacher, actually, so I've had kind of a strange path, but I think every recruiter will say they sort of fell backwards into it somehow. But yeah, I sold job posts for a bit, and then that was able to make the transition over to the other side, to the recruiting side eventually. But I enjoy it a lot, and I love helping people with their job search.
Amazing. Can I ask out of curiosity, what did you teach before you entered into the recruiting space?
I taught theater and English and creative writing.
Oh my goodness, close to my heart. I didn't know this before we hopped on the call. English major. I met my husband doing theater. I feel like you and I should have a separate
Amazing.
conversation. Amazing. Well, let's get right into it. I know that every industry and even individual companies have their own order of operations when it comes to recruitment. Can you mind talking us through the process from Ncontracts' point of view?
Yeah, absolutely. So I'll share all the gritty details of how a job gets made over here. So once a need is made and there's a budget for it, it gets passed over to me. I create a job description and then we post and we send that out to Indeed and LinkedIn and Glassdoor, and it would be posted on our career site. And then from there, I'm working with the hiring manager to make sure I have an understanding of what we're trying to do, how we're trying to do it, and best ways to approach that. And usually I'm the one reading all the resumes that come in. I want to emphasize that, there's no machine screening your resumes. It's me every time. So I'm looking through resumes. I'm looking in Handshake. I'm looking on LinkedIn to do some research for candidates for the role. And then we start the interview process. We move forward through there, usually 2 or 3 steps. And then we get to an offer and I hand them off to the HR team.
Love that. Okay. And then, I have heard from many students during events like this, and when I've talked to them personally, that one of the most daunting parts of recruitment for job seekers is networking. It's kind of this big, scary word that feels a little bit hand wavy and hard to define. Do you have any advice to help students prepare for networking opportunities and making impactful connections?
Yeah, absolutely. And I've realistically gotten every job and move I had by knowing someone and getting an introduction. So it's going to be the most valuable thing you can do for your job search to have people you can reach out to. And so, first thing you got to do is scan your network, understand uh, where your friends and family are and who they can introduce you to and who they can send messages to on your behalf and see where you can leverage those connections. I think it's also important to use the career fair opportunities that are available to you. I can't emphasize enough, making a face to face, in person connection with someone is so much more meaningful than getting a resume and a stack of resumes. So, incredibly important to find those opportunities when you can get them. And my last thing I wanted to say is when you're networking with recruiters, make sure you've applied into the role already before you reach out to them, because then it's actionable. They have all your information and you're not really asking them to do a favor for you or anything like that. So that's my tip to the job seeker.
That's really smart. I feel like I often ask for networking advice, and that last piece about applying before you reach out to a recruiter is a really helpful one that I haven't heard before. So love that. And okay, I'd love to transition into more of the actual application process, right? Do you have any advice for students to make a good first impression when it comes to their resume? I imagine you look at a lot of resumes in your line of work. Are there any common mistakes that you would want to warn people about?
Yeah. So yeah, I think understanding your resume strategy is understanding that, I have about 500 applicants per role on average. So you have to do things that stand out, but you also don't want to do stand out so much that you get filtered out. So, the first and foremost, make sure you review your resume for typos and errors. I've seen hiring managers see experienced candidates, see a typo, and move on. So, incredibly important that you're putting your best work forward, because if you see any mistakes, that people think it's indicative of your abilities. I think it's also important to quantify what you've done. So it's one thing to say, I was a lifeguard for a summer. It's another thing to be like, I passed three training certifications. I helped manage three lifeguards and help build their careers up from there. So put numbers to what you're saying, show that you've done achievements, show that you can meet deadlines. It's really important for a recruiter to see. And the last thing I want to say is just make sure your branding as a job seeker is up to date, professional, and high quality. Like if you don't have a picture in your LinkedIn profile, there's a lot of people that feel like that's a breach of trust. Like you want to make sure that you're showing yourself when necessary. You're not using an email address that is immature or from your middle school days or anything like that. So get a professional email address and just make sure you're presenting your best self.
Yeah, I think that's a really great point. And sorry, I'm going off script a little bit, Kevin, but one of the things that we have been asked quite a bit is about photos on a resume, and have been told many times to avoid photos on a resume because oftentimes there's kind of a bias issue there. So you should avoid that. But like, it is really important to have a fully fleshed out profile on Handshake or on LinkedIn, wherever you're showing up as a professional, to really represent yourself in that capacity. So I think that's a really great note. Thank you. Okay, I would love to move on to skills. And I think skills are a really important and hot topic for our audience here. Are there any skills that you specifically are looking for in candidates that you often see overlooked by job seekers in their applications or their interviews? And you can speak specifically to any of the roles you might be hiring for, or more broadly in just kind of early talent generally.
Yeah, so I'm going to stick to the broad side of things, but I think it's easy with the volume of applications and interviews that you have to go through to get a job to kind of just go through the motions and not ignite your passion as just like kind of moving things down the line. But remember, like that does impact your relationship building with a recruiter, and I think it's really important to show up with enthusiasm, to show up with positivity. No one wants to work with a negative person. No one wants to work with someone who doesn't have good communication or collaboration skills. So incredibly important to show that you want to be there. And then on that, most recruiters are going to ask you why you want to work for a specific place. And you want to have something more than just, well, you're going to pay me, right? I think it shows an opportunity where you can research, you can dig in, you can find what the value proposition is. And if you show that to the company, it shows you're curious and you're, proactive in your approach. And I think that helps a lot.
I think that's awesome. And I'm going to anticipate a question that we might get as folks are adding questions to the Q&A. But there are often folks who are wondering which types of questions they should ask at the end of an interview. So maybe we can spend some time in that in the Q&A section. A little bit meta questions on questions on questions.
Yeah.
Okay. And then I would love to talk about, standing out past the application process, right? When you are standing out to a recruiter during that first interview, do you have any tips for early talent when they're engaging directly with the recruiter? Finally, they've made it off the page onto the phone or onto the Zoom call. Do you have any kind of tips for the folks that might be in the audience today?
Yeah, I think one underlooked aspect of interviews is the ability to tell your own story. You get an opportunity to share your experience, and you can read all the bullet points in your resume if you want to, or you can have something prepared that's fun to listen to that shares something about yourself that isn't on the resume. And it's really important to practice it out loud too, because you want to know that you can say it, you can repeat it. It's not too short, it's not too long. It's something that's actionable for the recruiter. I think that's a where preparation can really help you in your interviews. And then uh, the other thing I wanted to say is make sure you know why what you're doing, what you want to do, and at least a couple years into your future. I interview a lot of people that are just like, yeah, I want to work. I like your company. I'll work anywhere. And that doesn't help your cause a lot of the times. You want to be focused in your strategy. You don't want to apply to every job in the company. You want to know what you do and do well and focus on that. And I think that's something that a lot of people take for granted.
Yeah, that's a really important thing to identify and to have a point of view on as your own future and the things that you want to do. And I'm realizing I totally skipped over a topic that I think is really, really important for our audience here today that is a little bit more focused on resume. But we get a lot of questions from our audience when it comes to, what to put on your resume to stand out to recruiters before you actually have directly applicable work experience. So whether you're applying to an internship for the first time, or you've had a service industry job, or maybe you're making a career pivot of some kind. You mentioned a bit about having your own personal winding path getting to your current career. Do you have any advice for folks who might not necessarily have apples to apples work experience to put on their resume?
Yeah, absolutely. So um, you know, career pivots happen, for most people. There's going to be a time where you have to figure out how to leverage what you've previously done into something new. And so it's a challenge everybody has to figure out. So I think it's super important to emphasize the soft skills that you've learned. And when I say soft skills, it's, that communication skill set, that ability to problem solve, that ability to figure out solutions when there isn't an obvious one available, to work with people, work in challenging situations, things like that. That can be leveraged into a variety of different jobs. So when I was a teacher, I emphasized my ability to meet deadlines, to be present in front of an active audience, to show the work that I did, to prepare. And so there's you might not think like, oh, he's a teacher, he's not a salesperson, but you can figure out how to leverage every past job into something that's actionable for future jobs. And I think that's something big to emphasize as well. Um, yeah, that's my answer.
I love it. Thank you for circling back with me a little bit. I know we have quite a few questions around resumes that have come through in the Q&A, but before we kick off that Q&A, I would love to do some rapid fire questions for
Yeah.
you. Okay, hot take, cover letter, yes or no?
Cover letter will always help you on some level, but I can't say that most of them aren't read. So take that or leave it. But for the big important jobs, write a cover letter. I think it's worth it.
Okay. Um, Sending a thank you note after an interview, yes or no?
So I've never had a no on an interview turn to a yes from a thank you note that was sent. But I have had people win when there's a tie in an interview process because they followed up and showed enthusiasm for the role. So I think it's always important to follow up with anyone you've had communication with. Um, I think it shows you're easy to work with and it shows your interest in the role.
I think that's a great, it could be the tiebreaker. Could be the tiebreaker for you. That's really important. Okay, paper resumes, good idea or unnecessary? What are your thoughts there?
So personally, when I set up interviews, I, attach resumes into any, interviewer's calendar or, print them out for any in-person interviews. So, I don't think you should, but I think as a backup, bring a couple resumes to an interview and, handing them out to someone who didn't get a chance to do that. That's a really nice touch. And it shows you're prepared and thought ahead.
I love it. Thank you. I appreciate you rolling with me on some of the hot takes. We have gotten really a lot of great questions, and I would love to dig into some of those. So I'm going to skim through quickly and see if there are any that feel like they're being asked more than once. Hmm. Okay. I would love if you could spend a little bit more time. We have a question from somebody who's asking, why is a face-to-face connection so meaningful? Can you talk a little bit about the value of that kind of in-person connection or, talking directly to somebody who's involved in the hiring process and how that can set somebody apart?
Yeah, I think there's a greater opportunity to make a relationship with the person on the other side of that career fair table. And so, if you submit a resume, you might get a call, you might make a relationship on that call, but, you'll be remembered at that career fair if you make an impression in person to these recruiters. I know I certainly have come away with, oh, that person was great to talk with. I hope they end up applying because I remember I have the face to the name there. And it shows that, you're a person that is interested in them and you're also a good person to work with and you can show off your soft skills in an easy way.
That's great. And we've got a lot of resume questions. So I would advise buckle up, Kevin, because
Let's
we've got
do
a
it.
lot of resume questions for you. Um, we have one person who's calling back to something you mentioned a little bit earlier, which is demonstrating the value proposition of the organization. And they're wondering how to bring that to life within their resume. Is that something that you would advise for an applicant to do as they're thinking about, applying to a role? Should they reflect the company's value prop in their resume?
I'd say it's probably a better fit in a cover letter if you wanted to include that. Certainly, I'm pro tailoring your resume for a job. It gets a little tedious when you have to do that a million times over and have 100 different drafts of your resume. So, I don't think it's an absolute requirement, but, if a company is in their core values, they just talk about results, and that's what you see them talking about in their blog posts, things like that. Make sure you show the projects that you've brought to completion, the things that they might care about based on that value system that they're putting out there.
Awesome. And you just mentioned a company that demonstrates results and clearly is results motivated. We have a question asking you to clarify a little bit about what quantifying your impact on your resume means in the context of a resume. So can you talk a little bit more about quantification as an applicant?
Yeah, absolutely. So um, I'll get specific first. So I hire a lot of business development representatives, which is sort of our entry level sales position. And it's incredibly important to make sure that there is quota attainment. You want to show your ability to be successful. And if you just say, like, what's the better statement? Yeah, I did great in that role. Or, yeah, I got 120% to quota and was promoted within 6 months. And then I was able to bring, 25 new logos of business in my first quarter. And it made me hit the President's Club. Like, that's a much more impactful, meaningful, specific statement that helps a hiring manager or recruiter kind of understand what you're actually doing.
I love that. I like to, in a very casual way, say quantify is numbers and stats and qualify is vibes. So,
Yes.
there's
Yes.
that's the really like casual way of saying it that I would share with my team. So I appreciate you walking through that example. Okay, here's a question for you that is interesting. It has to do with you mentioning that you should follow up with a recruiter after you've applied to a role. So this person is saying, how can we find hiring managers for the jobs we've applied to? And what should we ask them specifically if we're following up after we've already applied to a role?
Yeah. Um, So I think you're probably going to have a higher response rate from the recruiter if you're talking to them about an active job. I just the nature of hiring managers and the nature of how the recruiting function works, a lot of those intro conversations are going to be facilitated by the recruiter. So, if you can find out, it's a product marketing position and you found the product marketing leader on the team, yeah, go ahead and send them a message. But why I said talk after is because you don't want to make someone do you a favor. Like it doesn't help your network ability to ask someone for something immediately. You want to be like, hey, I've already applied. I think I'm a great fit because of these 3 bullet points. I'd love to set up a call. Let me know if my resume speaks to the position. And I think that's super impactful. It makes me as a recruiter go, okay, I'm going to go look this person up, look at their experience and say, oh, wow, yeah, they're right. That is a fit. I don't know if I would have, looked in that lens as intently if they hadn't, sent me that message. So that's, I think, where the opportunity is there.
Yeah, I love that. And that actually in itself answers another question that we got, which is what can we do after submitting an application to make the company know that we're interested? So I think that's a really great way. Do you have any other recommendations for applicants who might want to stand out to a company?
Yeah, so I think of particularly uh, uh, handshake interest is that you're going to see a lot of companies that have a university recruiter position. That's going to be the person who oversees and facilitates a lot of the intern hiring. So if you look at a company, search university recruiter, that's going to be probably your main line of contact and someone you want to build a long-term relationship with. So find the university recruiters. That's going to be the person that can help you the most on the inside. And they're going to want to hear from you. They're going to want to see proactive people that want to work for the company because ultimately it is kind of an entry level skill set. So you have to find ways to differentiate yourself.
Yeah, I think that's such a great note specifically about Handshake too, is, you can find those university recruiters on Handshake. You can message them within Handshake. You can even follow them, follow their specific user page if you want to see more from them. But also if you spot them on the Handshake feed posting content, maybe leave a comment there, stay top of mind for them. So really great note, Kevin. Thank you. Okay, I'd like to pivot a little bit into interviewing because we're getting quite a few questions about that as well. This person is asking about the importance of behavioral versus situational interview questions. Do you have any strong thoughts about like behavioral situational interviews?
Yeah, so for those who don't know the difference between that, behavioral is like asking someone about a past project, a past experience, where situational is, hey, what would you do if you were given these circumstances and in your approach? I think the behavioral is ultimately more valuable of an interviewing strategy, and it's what you should be prepared for as an interviewer. You're going to want to figure out what you've done that speaks to what they're looking for, and that's what they're trying to find out. So I usually ask something like, hey, I give everyone a bragging opportunity. What are you most proud of in your career? And so people can talk about a past experience that maybe wasn't like bullet pointed on their resume, but they can bring something to the interview that shows like, hey, this thing is really relevant and I wanted you to know that, so thank you for asking it. So just having those back pocket stories, if you've heard of the STAR method, situation, task, action, results, that's a great way to focus those behavioral interview questions and how to succeed in that kind of interview.
I love that. And I'm going to I'll take off my antennas and put on my handshake hat and just encourage anybody who's still in school. You very likely have access to a career center through your school who will facilitate mock interviews, which I think, to Kevin's point earlier, practicing in an interview setting is so important for building confidence in answering some of those questions. And so definitely reach out to your career center, set up some one-on-one time with a career counselor at your school. That's a resource that's available to you while you're a student that like you have to pay a lot of money for after college. So I would highly recommend that you take advantage of that to get those practice, STAR, situation, task, action, result. Get those questions like really tight and feel really confident in those. So thank you for speaking to that, Kevin. Okay. I am okay. I would love to get into the question that I previewed earlier because, as anticipated, there are some questions about questions. Are there any questions that you like to hear from a candidate at the end of an interview when you say, "Do you have any questions for me?" So as candidates are thinking through the questions that they should prepare in advance for their interview, and also as a caveat to that question, is it ever okay to say that you don't have questions at the end of an interview?
There's certain times where it's like we've talked quite a bit, talked through everything. I didn't have a concern that the person wasn't curious about the role. They got all their questions answered, and that's fine. I don't think you need to throw just any old question in just to say you have a question, but at the same time, it's another opportunity to set yourself apart. Everyone's going to want to hire someone that's intellectually curious, that has a growth mindset, as looking to better themselves in some way or understand something further. So being able to ask great questions at a time is really you just showing off your skill set in action. So, I think when I have interviewed and when in interviews, what I think are great questions are ones that kind of cut through the veneer of what is happening a lot at the company. So, you could ask, hey, what's the culture like? And you're going to get a boilerplate answer from the recruiter. Like, I don't know how meaningful of an answer you're going to get. But if you say, hey, what's one time you enforced your values as a company? Or what is you personally, what's your favorite thing about working here? You can get much more granular, specific things that give you a sense of what it's actually like versus like the mythical idea of core values and how you'll fit into those. So that's my 2 cents there.
I love that. I really I like the call out about asking a personal question because I think that that's much less likely to get like a boilerplate answer. I was once asked, you've been at Handshake for 5 years. In startup world, that is like a million years. What's kept you at Handshake so long? And that for me was like a really compelling question that actually caused me to sit back and reflect about my time here and really engage on an authentic level with the candidate. So I love that piece of advice. Okay, we're gonna get meta here. There are some questions about being recruited to be a recruiter and wanting to work in the talent acquisition or HR space. Do you have any recommendations or key skills to acquire for somebody that maybe aspires to become a recruiter someday?
Yeah, absolutely. First and foremost, the path for recruiters is not straight. So, uh, there, you know, I can't necessarily say do this thing and this is how you become a recruiter. But at the same time, there are entry points to this. So there's jobs that are starting to be hired again, recruiting coordinators. That's sort of the entry level admin on a recruiting team. And then I think agency recruiting usually sees quite a bit of hiring, and you'll be able to get a sense of the industry, how to run interviews, how to learn all the basics there, and just to see how the motion works. And if you like it, you can succeed there and leverage that further up the chain within agency or move over to the in house side. I personally came through the sales side, like I said, so I sold job posts and then I was hired at a tech company here to do sales first. And then an internal recruiter position opened up and I was able to talk about my past experience and move over that way. So yeah, it's not straight, but I also highly recommend a recruiting career. It's getting people jobs is extremely meaningful day to day.
I love that. Thank you so much. Okay, I'm gonna do a couple more like really rapid fire questions before we wrap. We've got 2 more minutes and I'm gonna try to get through as many as we can. Resume length. Should a resume be constrained to one page, especially for early talent, and does it make a difference?
I'm going to say for early talent, most likely yes, 1 page is all you need. But
Mhm.
if you go to, make it worth it. It shouldn't be like your uh, juggling skills or like save the irrelevant stuff. But if you have jobs that you really want to detail out and have specific relevance, go for it. I mean, electronically, it's just another little bit of a scroll, so it's not like a pain for the recruiter to read a second, third page, but just make it worth it. We're looking through a lot of resumes very quickly. The more clear the information, the more concise, the more efficient the information, the better for the recruiter and the job seeking experience.
And to your point about looking through a lot of resumes, I'm going to kind of combine two questions here. Do recruiters who get as many applications per role as you do use ATS scanners to filter? And should applicants go for more traditional black and white, kind of straightforward ATS friendly resume or get creative with their resume?
Yeah. Um, you know, get creative, but understand that resumes get parsed into systems, and that if you use some crazy formatting or you've, drawn it in PDF and it can't pull the information, that only hurts you as a candidate. So
Mhm.
I would say keep the information simple, keep it a simple font, keep it, bullet pointed, and that's going to help you the most. But if you're a designer, there's exceptions here. Like there are ways to show off your skill set for specific skills in your resume, but for 90% of people, I'd say stick to the basics.
I think that's such a great note to end on is, keep it simple, do your best to quantify your experience and engage authentically with recruiters when you're having a great conversation. Kevin, thank you so, so much for taking your time today. This time really flew by and I feel like we got to get through a lot of the questions that were asked. I really appreciate you sharing your wisdom with our audience here. We're super excited to bring you, the audience, more events in this vein. So please be sure to take 30 seconds to fill out our feedback survey so that we know which types of events you're interested in attending, what kinds of questions you might have for us. And in the meantime, be sure to check our events page to see more upcoming recruiter workshops and more. And with that, thank you so much, Kevin, and everybody in the audience. I hope you all have a fabulous rest of your day and a happy Halloween if you are participating in Halloween today. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody.
Thank you.